Welcome to Life Stories, where we share heartfelt tales of family, love, and the lessons we learn along the way. Today's story is about a family torn apart by favoritism, deceit, and a beloved family heirloom, the beach house that had been in their family for generations. As secrets unravel and truths are revealed, one daughter stands up for what's right, challenging years of manipulation and favoritism. What follows is a journey of confrontation, healing, and the surprising power of forgiveness. Join us today and don't forget to subscribe to begin this emotional journey with us. It was a quiet morning. One of those still, reflective days where the sunlight streams through your window with an almost gentle reminder that life goes on. I, Emily Adams, sat by the window of my apartment in Boston, sipping my coffee, staring out at the city skyline. At 34, I thought I had grown accustomed to my family's dynamics, the peculiar way we all moved around each other. Like planets in orbit, always circling but never quite aligning. I had learned long ago to keep my distance, to protect myself from the emotional chaos that swirled every time we gathered together. But today, I felt a strange weight in my chest, an unease that I couldn't shake. Then, the text arrived. It was from my sister, Jessica, a photo of herself, proudly standing in front of our family's beach house. The one we had all spent so many summers in. The one with the weathered blue shutters that had witnessed generations of our family's laughter and tears. She was posing, a smug look on her face, arms crossed, a self-satisfied smirk tugging at her lips. The text beneath it read, "Mom and Dad finally recognized who deserves this place. Hope you're not too disappointed." The beach house had been in our family for decades, built by our grandfather with his own hands, who had spent weekends crafting the wraparound porch where we watched storms roll over the Atlantic. Every board, every window, every room held memories of my childhood, my first steps on the hardwood floors. My mother teaching me to bake in the sunny kitchen. My father showing me how to sail from our private dock. The house wasn't just a piece of property, it was the heart of our family. A reminder of our roots, our history, and our connection to one another. And now, it seemed to be slipping away into Jessica's hands with a mere $1. I couldn't stop the feelings that swelled within me, betrayal, anger, confusion. My heart raced as I took another sip of my coffee, trying to steady my nerves before replying. I could almost hear Jessica's voice in my head. That tone of superiority she always used when she was rubbing her latest victory in my face. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but instead, I kept my voice calm when I responded, letting her gloat a little longer before pulling the rug out from under her. I typed back, "Check the deed again. I was just speaking with Mr. Harrison yesterday, Grandpa's lawyer." I could almost hear the panic in her voice when she replied, "What do you mean? Why would you be talking to him?" Her perfectly manicured nails, I imagined, tapping nervously against her coffee mug. I had known something was wrong for months. Ever since Mom had started making odd comments about simplifying the family assets, asking questions about my attachment to the house, I had felt a growing suspicion that they were planning something behind my back. I reached out to Mr. Harrison, Grandpa's lawyer, and learned that the beach house wasn't technically theirs to sell. It had been held in a trust Grandpa had set up before his death. And he had specifically stated that the property could not be sold without the consent of both granddaughters. A trust that both Jessica and I were beneficiaries of, equal owners, with shared rights to that house. The law was clear, but my parents had decided to bypass it, selling the house to Jessica for a symbolic $1. When I told Jessica about the trust, I could almost see the color drain from her face over the video call. I knew that, for a moment, she didn't know whether to believe me or not. But the truth was now out, and I wasn't backing down. "You're lying," she snapped, though I could hear the uncertainty creeping into her voice. She didn't want to believe it. For so long, she had been the golden child, the one who always received preferential treatment from our parents. They had always pampered her, indulging her whims, while I worked hard to achieve my own success. I had earned my position at a prestigious law firm, and yet, I was always the one who was dismissed, overlooked, while Jessica's every mistake was excused. They didn't have full ownership. I said, the calmness of my voice betraying the storm of emotions inside me. They were trustees, Jessica. They never owned the property outright. The trust prohibits the sale without both of us agreeing to it. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the messages from Mr. Harrison, the trust documents, and the emails that proved I wasn't lying. Want me to forward you the documents? Or should I wait for Mr. Harrison to call you directly? He's pretty interested in that dollar sale. The silence that followed felt almost deafening. Jessica was trying to grasp what was happening. Her perfect little world, built on our parents' favoritism and her own unearned victories, was falling apart. I could almost hear her breath catch in her throat as she tried to hold onto her sense of control. The one thing she had always had over me. You've always been jealous, she finally spat out. That's why they gave me the house. I deserve it. The words stung, but I was beyond caring. For years, I had been the one to silently endure, to work harder and longer, while Jessica played the role of the spoiled child. This wasn't about jealousy. This was about justice. This was about the law. And about ensuring that our grandfather's legacy, his careful protection of both of us, was honored. This isn't about preference, Jessica, I replied firmly. It's about the law. And tomorrow, you're going to learn exactly what that means. Tomorrow was going to be a day of reckoning. Not just for Jessica, but for all of us. My family had manipulated me for years. And now, the truth was finally coming to light. I couldn't say what I felt, relief, anger, sadness, because all of them seemed to intertwine. What I knew for sure was that tomorrow would be the day everything changed. The next morning, I walked into Mr. Harrison's office, my heart heavy with anticipation. As I sat in the sleek leather chair, the rain outside the floor-to-ceiling windows mirrored the storm I could feel brewing within my family. The tension was palpable, and the weight of what I was about to do pressed down on my chest. I had spent months gathering the pieces of this puzzle, documenting every conversation, every subtle comment from my parents. I had known they were planning something with the beach house. And I had finally unearthed the truth. Mr. Harrison, the lawyer who had been handling my grandfather's trust, was already waiting for me. His bow tie was slightly crooked, a clear sign that he'd been handling some heated conversations. His calm demeanor was a sharp contrast to the turmoil I felt inside. He gestured to the stack of legal documents in front of him. The paperwork is ready, he said, his voice steady. By tomorrow, this will all be official. Your family will learn that their scheme has backfired. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over me. My parents had never taken me seriously before. They had always been more concerned with Jessica, always with their eyes fixed on her future, her success, real or imagined, while dismissing my own accomplishments. They had turned a blind eye to my hard work, my achievements, and my aspirations, while spoon-feeding Jessica's every whim. I had learned early on that in our family, my success wasn't celebrated, it was simply expected. But today, I was about to take back control of what was rightfully mine. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Jessica. You've gone too far. This is ridiculous. Mom and Dad are livid. There was no surprise there. My parents had already been calling me nonstop, demanding an explanation, accusing me of sabotaging their plan. They didn't understand that this wasn't about me wanting the house. This was about my grandfather's wishes. This was about fairness. I scrolled through their messages, each one more desperate than the last. Why are you doing this to your sister? Don't you want us to be happy? I could feel the manipulative undertones in every word. But there was no turning back now. This wasn't just about family drama. This was about my right to share in the inheritance my grandfather had left for us both. It was about the integrity of his will and the trust he had placed in us. Let them wait, I said to Mr. Harrison, the quiet resolve in my voice almost surprising even me. I'm not giving in this time. As we continued to review the documents, the reality of what was happening began to settle in. The trust had specific provisions, one that would trigger immediate legal consequences for anyone involved in a fraudulent sale. If your parents proceed with this sale, Mr. Harrison explained, the property will fall under court supervision. They'll lose control of it. And anyone involved in the fraudulent transfer will be barred from using the property for 5 years. The thought of Jessica trying to go through with the renovations she had planned filled me with a dark satisfaction. She had already started redecorating, ordering new furniture, hiring contractors. It was as if she thought she could erase all the memories. All the years spent there with our family. I had no doubt that she was desperate to make the place her own. To make it a symbol of her victory over me. But her plans were about to come crashing down. Better cancel those orders, I advised, leaning back in my chair. Because as of tomorrow, that sale is going to be void. I could almost hear Jessica's voice, filled with disbelief and frustration. But there was no stopping what was coming. The storm was inevitable, and I was finally ready to face it. Later that day, my parents arrived at Mr. Harrison's office. I could tell by the look on their faces that they had already begun to panic. Their perfect little plan was falling apart, and they were scrambling for a way to fix it. Mom was crying, something that I had always found to be part of her manipulative tactics. Dad, on the other hand, seemed more angry than worried. His fists clenched as he stormed into the room. What is the meaning of this? Dad demanded, his voice shaking with barely contained fury. We had every right to sell that property. You can't do this to your sister. We're her parents. I stood up slowly, looking them both in the eye. Actually, you didn't have the right to sell the property, I said, my voice steady. As trustees, your role was to maintain the property for both beneficiaries. The trust explicitly prohibits selling or transferring ownership without both granddaughters' consent. My father's face turned pale. He was caught. There was no way out of this one. But instead of accepting responsibility, he snapped, "This is ridiculous. You're tearing the family apart over a piece of property." "It's not about the property," I replied, my voice hardening. "It's about the law, about fairness, and it's about making sure that what Grandpa wanted for us is honored. You've spent years making decisions for Jessica without considering how they affected me. This was supposed to be about both of us. But you've always favored her." I could see the guilt start to settle in. But my mother still wasn't ready to accept the truth. "We only wanted what was best for Jessica," she cried. "She needs this more than you do. You have your career. You don't need the beach house." "I didn't need it," I said quietly. "But Grandpa wanted us both to have it. Equal rights. Equal ownership. And you've tried to take that away from me." The room fell silent as the weight of my words sank in. They had never truly understood the damage they had caused. The years of favoritism and manipulation. But now, the truth was out, and it was time for them to face the consequences. The next day felt like a strange blend of anticipation and relief. I had already signed the legal documents, knowing that everything was now in motion. The sale of the beach house would be reversed, and my parents' manipulation would finally be exposed for what it was. It was a bittersweet moment, though, because part of me felt sad. The house, our family home, had always been a place of joy, where memories were made, but now, it felt as though it was caught between the weight of our family's past and the uncertain future ahead. I sat at my desk, trying to focus on my work, but my mind kept wandering back to the beach house. I couldn't help but think of Grandpa and his wisdom. He had always been a man of quiet strength, someone who believed deeply in fairness and justice. I remembered him sitting on the porch in his old rocking chair, watching over our family with a gentle, knowing look in his eyes. He had always tried to balance the love he had for us with a deep sense of fairness. And, as much as I hated to admit it, he had seen the patterns in our family long before they became apparent to me. He had known that this day would come. My phone buzzed, and I glanced at the message from Jessica. "I've already started redecorating," she wrote. "I've ordered new furniture, and I've hired contractors. This is my house now. Emily, deal with it." I could feel my heart race as I read her words. It was as if she thought the beach house was some kind of prize, a trophy she could claim as her own. But what she didn't understand was that the house wasn't just a property, it was a symbol of our family, of everything we had been through together. And it belonged to both of us. "Better cancel those orders," I typed back, feeling a calmness wash over me. "Because tomorrow, that sale is going to be void. The trust doesn't allow it." I watched as the text bubbles stopped, then started again, followed by a short, sharp reply. "You're jealous. Always have been." That's why Mom and Dad gave me the house. They know I deserve it more than you. I shook my head, not bothering to reply. I didn't need to justify myself to her anymore. It wasn't about the house. It was about doing what was right. About holding our parents accountable for their actions. They had always chosen sides. And now they had to face the consequences. The following morning, I found myself sitting across from Mr. Harrison in his office once more. He had been handling Grandpa's trust for years. And now, he was our final line of defense. The door opened, and my parents walked in, looking even more anxious than the day before. Mom's eyes were puffy from crying, and Dad's shoulders were tense with anger. We had every right to sell that house. Dad shouted, his voice filled with frustration. We're her parents. We know what's best for Jessica. But Mr. Harrison remained calm, his voice steady as he explained the terms of the trust once again. As trustees, you were only responsible for maintaining the property for both of the beneficiaries. You never had the right to sell it without their consent. The trust clearly prohibits it. I could feel my pulse quicken as I watched my parents' faces change. The truth was undeniable, and it was sinking in. Piece by piece, for the first time, they were being forced to face the consequences of their actions. And it was a reckoning they hadn't prepared for. It's not just about the house, I said quietly, breaking the silence. It's about fairness. It's about treating us equally. You've spent so many years giving Jessica everything she wanted, ignoring my achievements, and expecting me to simply go along with it. But that's not how this works anymore. The room was heavy with silence. My parents were quiet now, the anger and defensiveness slowly giving way to guilt. For the first time, they couldn't argue their way out of the truth. But that didn't make it any easier. You don't understand, Mom said, her voice trembling. We only wanted to secure Jessica's future. She needs the house. You've always had your career. You don't need it. I could feel the weight of her words. But I also knew they were wrong. I had spent my entire life working for what I had, never asking for more than what I had earned. But my parents had never seen it that way. They had always given Jessica what she wanted, while I was expected to be content with what I achieved on my own. It's not about need, I said softly. It's about fairness. Grandpa saw it. That's why he set up the trust. He wanted us both to have equal rights to the house. He wanted us both to have a place where we could come together, not be torn apart by favoritism and manipulation. For a long moment, no one spoke. The weight of what I had said hung in the air. And then, almost as if in agreement, the storm outside finally started to subside. The rain had stopped, and a strange sense of quiet filled the room. As the silence stretched on, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. This wasn't just about the house, it was about making sure that we, as a family, were finally seeing things clearly. We had spent so many years stuck in old patterns. But now, with the truth finally laid bare, there was a chance for something better. The storm might have passed, but the healing was just beginning. As the weeks passed, things began to shift in ways I hadn't expected. The tension that had once filled our family gatherings slowly started to dissipate. Jessica and I began working together on the house. Each weekend spent repairing the old rooms, restoring them to their former glory. We weren't just fixing walls and floors, we were repairing something deeper. Something that had been broken for years. It wasn't easy. The first few days felt awkward, filled with tension and unspoken words. But gradually, we started talking. Not just about the house, but about everything, about our childhood, about the unfairness we had both experienced in different ways. And slowly, we found common ground. I watched as Jessica made an effort to learn and grow, taking responsibility for the mistakes she had made. For the first time, she wasn't just the golden child who got everything handed to her. She was learning to stand on her own, and I couldn't help but feel proud of her. One evening, after we had finished repainting the guest room, Jessica sat down next to me, holding out a small envelope. Inside, there was a check. It was for the contractor's deposits she had paid for the renovations. She had repaid every penny, acknowledging the mistake she had made. It's the right thing to do, she said softly. As we stood there, looking out over the beach, I realized something profound. Sometimes, it's not about getting revenge or winning a battle. It's about finding a way to move forward together. And perhaps the best way to heal is through empathy, understanding, and a willingness to change. Our family wasn't perfect, and we still had a lot of work to do. But as we stood there, on the porch of the house that had once been a symbol of division, I knew we were finally on the path to becoming whole again. And for the first time in years, I felt hopeful about our future. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more life stories and emotional journeys that touch the heart.